Okay. I would like to try to talk about something that's been on my mind for a while, and it shouldn't even be this serious, but it feels like it's this serious. And, you know, I've been an atheist my whole life, and basically I more or less still am. I'm not sure what about that has exactly changed. But I have some feelings when it comes to the Bible. And I think, and these feelings that I did not know I had have been buried for a really long time, I think since I was really little. And somewhere around the same time where all of a sudden baby Jesus was somebody that we're going to go see to a pageant, wake up early in the morning and watch a sunrise and watch a pageant of somebody. I don't know what that Easter morning stuff was, but it never really, that's when it kind of stopped making sense as a little girl, because it's like, well, here's, you're not, but the whole thing is, the whole point of the little baby in the manger, who you just were talking about, is that it's infinite hope. Eternal life. And see, here's also what happens with this story, because it's a story, it's all a metaphor, but there's still feelings. So I want to talk about it as I talk about some stuff that has to do with the grander telling of this story, because I don't really particularly remember anyone talking to me about Jesus or the manger scene or any of it, except maybe church, but even then I don't really remember, because church was not that big of a thing in my family. It was more about, it's more about like, what are you gonna wear, and you better be wearing something that's like the most appropriate, but you know, somewhere in between the lines you still want to look pretty, but that's like, and like who's gonna be there, what list in a bulletin, or maybe a photo in the monthly newsletter could you be in. It just becomes this other crucifix for the ego, dying in the most beautiful buildings in town, and it's just a place where people go to die, basically, because nobody ever actually talks about Jesus in the way that it was told to me somewhere around the time that I was really little. And it was probably, it had to have been my grandmother, because my grandparents didn't live in town. They lived like an hour and 15 minutes away, which is just far enough that you don't do it that often, because adults don't really, time doesn't work the same when grown-ups get older, and they don't realize how long it is to wait to see your grandparents, and so it gets really special. And on your drive, which is like the longest drive ever when you're really little, and you don't get to go that way very often, because if you did, you'd have to visit the grandparents, you know, thank your parents, but there's like a little town somewhere off to the east between some hills, and I remember we would talk about baby Jesus, because I thought that town looked like Bethlehem. And it would be going to go spend the night with my grandmother for the weekend, which was really special, every time. So, it's a story, it's a metaphor, it's largely useless to most people, including me, up until I kind of stumbled back into it maybe about a year ago and realized, like, I didn't so much have trauma about church because I experienced it to be a place of beautiful music, whether it was like humble shape note kind of singing and revivals, or even the worst of the worst churches still figure out how to make music, and that brings people back, even though it's horrible music. But it's really catchy praise music at the most horrible of churches, who don't have anything to do with Jesus, which is like what we're talking about, right? As it turns out, everything has to come back to either their mothers or Jesus. And here we go. Somehow I'm talking about Jesus, and don't even believe in any of this stuff, except it means something to me. I have feelings about it, apparently, which I uncovered as I've been doing all of this inner child work, which is just like a really fancy way of saying I've just been letting myself be triggered. First of all, I experienced trauma, and then I'm just letting myself be triggered by, or not letting myself, just like allowing myself to feel my feelings. And with that comes a lot of buried memories and buried experiences of feeling your own feelings when you're growing up and at your most critical periods of development. You earn all these hazy emotional scars for which you don't have language or even a memory most of the time. So it kind of just sits with you as like these emotional scars. And for me, I kind of experienced like a really ambiguously horrendous trauma over a really long period of time. And then it was under the umbrella of all this other trauma, which I'd been trying to like pretend wasn't there for a really long time, or like try to brush it over because I love my mother very much and nothing is her fault. And that being said, I don't think she really fixated on anybody dying on a cross, because that is a horrendous thing to do to kids who you just told about perfect baby Jesus, and then you're gonna kill him on a cross. Like, and what even is a cross? You're just like, as a kid, like, this makes zero sense. And then there's all these people praying over there and acting like we're supposed to be like happy about something. It's like, he just said that everything was going to be better. He just said it. He was just born. Y'all were just excited. And then there he is dying on some boards, and y'all made him carry it through town and all this stuff that made zero sense. Like, you just told us it's God, and then this happens to God? Yeah, then you do the like, let's go back and edit and pretend and say, oh, it's God in a human body. But even Jesus himself was telling everybody that the human body is a vessel for God, which is consciousness intersected with matter, full consciousness of every single one of your cells. And you get to tell them you don't have to die anymore. None of you has to die. Every single one of you is important. And that is what Jesus was trying to teach, because he was a man and he had bullshit stuff happen to him. And when you have profound knowledge, which you gain from a different culture than his own, that's why there's a blank space in the Bible. It's for when Jesus learned about everything and learned the secrets from the other part of the world that also had a lot of the clues about what was really going on. So Jesus goes there and comes back knowing. It's like, no, they verified over there some stuff that I can tell within my body is already true. And he's like, it's the first time that he can tell, because nobody talks about these people within his culture. He's like, the first time, which is, it's everybody, by the way. That's the like, That's the read between the lines. That's why we talk about this story. It's because it's a story about every baby. It's a story about all of us. And we tell it this way because we don't understand the power that is implied in this story. And we haven't for a long time. There are all these stories throughout all of the globe that humans come up with that tell this same story about this human body, but then it's somehow God. But it's not yet quite conscious of itself, so it's very vulnerable at first. And that's where it's like, you know, you're a man, you are man, you are Adam and Jesus, because time doesn't exist. And this is what Jesus came back teaching, because he'd had it verified in a few different places, and most significantly within his own heart through meditation in the wilderness, which is a beautiful metaphor for suffering. He suffered a long time, and there was nobody there to write about it. There was nobody there to take pictures, nobody there to write news stories, nobody there to be like, oh, look how much of a hero this person is. Like, nobody was documenting it. Nobody was making this future except for this same man who'd had all this bullshit happen to him, and he took himself out. He was like, nope, done with all that. I need a timeout. But when he starts trying to teach about the power of the human form and the beingness of being a human, that's when people start writing down stories about somebody who didn't really relate that much to who Jesus actually was, because he was actually trying to teach everybody some cool stuff that he learned in meditation, and then had verified in a bunch of different places in the world, and saw the same most quiet meditators all coming back with this same wisdom that he figured out himself in the wilderness, just going inside and doing all of his inner child work and letting himself feel his feelings. And he discovered the same thing, because he carried all this pain, and he went into it, and it's a cavernous place, but he came out and knew, and then verified it, because he's a man. So he went and verified it and learned some more skills and some more things that he could some more language that he could maybe use to put words around it. But he comes back, and by this time, usually, he's got some people surrounding him and following him, because they've seen him do some things that defy their own rational minds. And so they know that there's something real, and it was good stuff, and made everyone happy. And they were like, what is this happiness that we see? Like, it's like he's taking away all the bad stuff. He's taking away even our idea of what a rotting body can do. He's taking away everything, because we are seeing it. It's like the first witnesses. And they're like, we can't unsee it. So it's like eyewitness. An eyewitness. And some of these people who follow him around don't even like him. Like, he grates on their nerves. And he has a lot of feelings. And they're like, it's really difficult for us to deal with feelings, because nobody ever let us feel them. And we've got to say no girls allowed in our little club, because they make us feel our feelings even more, and they clearly have an understanding of what feelings are about. And somebody told us that we don't get to have whatever they want that we can't figure out. So they follow Jesus around in a pack, even though they don't really like this guy as the leader. It's like, well, he's not going to do anything specifically mean to me, I guess. There's evidence. It's fine for now. Until we get to the fucking end of the story, which is the one that people tell. And so what happens is that Jesus is like had this girlfriend, but like not a girlfriend. Like it was like, here this dude is, he has everything. He has a troop of guys all around him. We're bros, having fun, talking about our secret stuff. And Jesus is like, it wasn't meant to be a fucking secret. What I was trying to do is figure out how to teach everybody else, not teach this little entity of pack mentality. That was what he was not trying to do that. And in the meantime, while he's like in his own real world of what he was really trying to teach, he finally meets somebody who got it, who had gotten the same messages when she was in the wilderness. And they like compared notes, and it was like, oh my gosh, like, and she came from like a background where she wasn't really wanting of anything either, and had trauma. And as a little girl, and maybe this is where her trauma is. As a little girl, she was at 3 years old or so put into this religious path of like sacred divinity, ancient wisdoms, mystery school kind of teachings. And her parents were wealthy enough that her father, and like woke enough that her dad was like, no, we're going to get her the best training from the get-go. So when she says her first word, which is mom, because it's the same thing as me, because when you're born, you all know that we're all the same. So nobody's saying this is my favorite, because it's like the baby's like, it's already me, mom, mama, me. It's the first thing you can do with your lips. But she was put in this mystery school when she was like 3, which is like a dude's idea of like, okay, we've got to train her and give her the Suzuki method, like everything. You know, football at 6, it's the same thing. Throw them in temple, get them to memorize these words, because they clearly seem like they know what's going on already. So maybe if we like train them, they can figure out how to save us. It's like sort of the idea behind what Jesus over here was going through himself. Member of the pack. It was a very loving pack. But he couldn't figure out how to teach them. It was like, no, but I learned some really cool stuff. Like, here I am, I'm part of the pack. I've got the goods. I finally figured out what all these letters are that y'all are trying to teach us. It all relates back to this ancient wisdom that I even verified over here and over here. And now I can tell you about how going inside yourself like leads you to God. Leads you to like the belief in God. Leads you to the realization that the Jews are like, we already knew that. That it was like the concept of hell doesn't make any sense. It doesn't resonate with anybody. It's like even the worst of the worst, you like imagine them, and it's like not really that tolerable. It's not fun to think about for longer than a split second. Or an entire movie, which is what that's like a great way of projecting your own fears. But so back to our story. They're both overeducated, feeling groovy. They've got, even though Jesus came from this questionable circumstances around his birth, it's like, nope, he's part of the pack. He's like, okay, good. So he has this safety idea about packs, but he's like got some really good knowledge and comes back. And it's like he's the first eyewitness, and he like experiences it, and he's like, look, I can make it do these things. Like, look, I can make more food out of other food. It's like we're always trying to keep the light burning. Like maybe this is what it was about, is the eternal flame that's already there, so that humans don't have to keep doing this minutia of irritating tasks, such as lighting the fire and keeping it going, which is a very difficult thing to do. Especially when you have to like keep moving around to find more dry wood and more firewood because you can't get everybody to keep bringing it back. It's just like 3D nonsense. And Jesus is like, look, we don't have to do this anymore. Look, we can even make more food out of the food we have. And nobody really is picking up what he's putting down. They just kind of pouring it back into their same receptacle, and like then it's like he starts feeling a little crazy, and then it's like, okay, but I've got this pack, so we're cool. And then he comes smack up against, he's living in this like weird limbo basically, because he can't figure out how to get away from this pack that he knows is non-existent, because he's already figured out that we're all one and death doesn't exist, just a myth that people keep living out because we tell that story, and that's what metaphors do. They actually control the quantum. He didn't have that language, but he didn't need the language because he'd already tapped into it and felt it and knew what it could do and could make more food out of food, cure people. He wasn't doing creepy, crazy stuff. And I don't use that word lightly. He wasn't doing any of that. He was trying to find what is the thing that's going to help everybody see how powerful this already is and how we can already do it ourselves, and it was saving people and healing. And he was very particular about when he shared those gifts, because you don't want people to abuse the teachings, and he couldn't figure out how to he couldn't figure out how to teach it and make sure that nobody was abusing it. So he's in his pack, so he's like, okay, maybe as long as I have these dudes following me around, I can think straight and come up with a better idea. No. Okay, so what happens, instead of like getting smacked with a bunch more trauma, he meets the love of his life, and it's like, and he's like, wait a minute, I already knew you existed. I knew there was more to this story, because he's like, what I always really wanted was somebody to really see me and get what I'm trying to teach and already get it, and be able to use this language that I haven't thought to put with it, but like totally resonates with me. And so this is Mary Magdalene. And he's like, and it's not any of the dirty stories that you hear about her that are told by other packs. It's sometimes told within the pack, people who are in the pack and like don't want another girl around, because it ruins this idea that Jesus is like, I didn't invent that it had to be dudes only. That wasn't me, but I had to like let y'all come up with your own rules about how this works, and y'all came up with no girls allowed. Like, Jesus is like, from the get-go, I've been trying to figure out how to tell y'all that you have the wrong, I didn't agree to like have a secret boys only club. But he's so used to it that it's like perplexing to him when he's staring at somebody who's like, hello, I know all the same stuff as you, and look, I haven't had some pack following me around, and I've actually been using it and figuring out what the implications are. And she's like, and you think that you knew who I was before we met? She's like, you know women know everything. And he's like, what? Exactly. He's like, I knew there was something missing, and I forgot about the fact that they made it a boys-only club. And he's like, I hadn't gotten to try it in that way yet, and I hadn't thought about it that way. And she's like, yeah, dude, like, you want to really get close to God, it's through deep and divine love of another human, and particularly very intimate, private love, which is what they shared. And I'm not talking about like gruesome, I'm talking about like, it's not pornography, it's like a very different expression of exactly who they were. So you know what, it's none of your business, right? Like exactly what they did. So let's not pretend we all know any of that stuff, because that's private, and private stays private even in the quantum. But it's love. So we won't get graphic. So Jesus meets this woman who's like, this is what I've been trying to teach everybody, that there's actually, and I forgot that, like, there could be a part where it's like, really though, like, if your idea of a happily ever after is a woman, a divine feminine, which could be any type of person that we like want to label with all these things that are labels that make it seem like we're all not the same, we're all the same, just different fractals of the same. But so Jesus is like, I have this girlfriend over there here, and she's taught me a lot of stuff. There's more to it. And the guys are like, still only boys allowed. So Jesus gets kind of mad, and he's low-key disgruntled for a while. But nobody's going to write about her, because they're all like, nope, she's out. We're not inviting anybody else in. We're not believing that there's a woman who can literally do all the stuff that Jesus has been doing. And we thought it was like our bros club, where he's only going to do these magic tricks basically just for us. And then we find out that there's a woman who already knew how to do all this stuff, and she's really nice. She's really nice. We get why he likes her. We don't want to be with her like that, but she's like really smart too. So they're kind of like, okay, I don't know what's up, but it seems like there's a love story involved. Because it's really exactly what Jesus would have wanted. Is more of a love story with somebody else, where he can talk about the stuff that's on his heart, that's in his heart. It's a love story. So then everybody catches on that they like each other, that they're in love, that it's really this powerful thing, and everything gets ahead of them. They couldn't keep up. Like, they didn't even get to have a party to tell everybody how much they liked each other. And before you know it, MaryMagdalene has this real trauma. Like, her brother Lazarus up and dies. Like, it was probably coronavirus or something. He dies, and her family tries to get in touch with Jesus, because they're like, we hear that her boyfriend can do magic tricks. Like, why don't we where is that dude? Get him over here. So the disciples somehow catch wind of this, and within a couple days, they've like passed this message that MaryMagdalene was not passing. She was in deep contemplation and was grieving, but she was not the one telling Jesus to come to do this. But everybody else was in his ear, like, you've got to go there. The one who you love needs you. She needs you. We don't know what to do with this profound grief. She needs you. We don't know why Lazarus died. It doesn't make any sense. Go make her better. And Jesus is like, well, what do I do? Okay. He's like, but she's more powerful than me. I can't go show up there. And then it's like, and not be able to help. But everybody totes him back to Bethany. Totes him to Bethany, where it's like Lazarus has died, and they share this beautiful night together. And basically they like exchanged all of the codes for exactly how life works. It was like they're two pieces of a puzzle, and both know the other half of it, but they're united in love. And so they had this implicit understanding that, no, we can't really share this around. But they knew how much power it had, and this is where it gets like kind of twisted in the middle, and all of a sudden we're getting Lazarus back from the dead. Instead of teaching everybody about how to live, which she couldn't teach him. He wasn't listening to her. Nobody listened to the women. She was teaching them already, and he fucking died? Like, of course she's sad. And then y'all are gonna come pull some dude in to like make it better? Like, and she's like, that is my private person who understood implicitly through our hearts what was going on. And he got it because I couldn't save him. I couldn't explain it to him. I couldn't get him to listen because everyone told him from the get-go, you don't listen to the women. You only suck their breasts. So he dies. And here comes Jesus, and she's like, don't start doing the tricks again. Don't do it. But he's like, but the pack. Everybody's gotta, like, I already came. You've gotta help me. And she's like, okay, I get it. I know. Fine. We'll bring him back. But this is ridiculous and gross because he's like now rotting in a tomb somewhere. And Jesus is like, we've got to do it. We've got to make a zombie. And then maybe everyone will see how much we love each other. Maybe then we can have a party about how death doesn't exist. And so they build up enough energy in their connection with each other, their electromagnetic connection through their hearts. They build up enough energy in that loving connection, because you can't make this type of connection unless it's literally at the frequency of love, which is something you can't access if you're doing things with ill intentions or have like the wrong reasonings about you. But they build up enough connection in their field, they're going to be able to do this whole thing with Lazarus, who wouldn't listen to me in the first place. And he was my best friend, but now he's dead. So I don't know. It's not going to work if we bring him back. Like, it's it's like he already betrayed me and died on top of it. Like, just to prove to me how I didn't know anything. Like, that's a kind of a dick move. If you do, if I do say so. So Jesus comes to help MaryMagdalene. But she's like, fine, okay, I get it. We'll have to do this magic trick. We bring Lazarus back from the dead, blah, blah, blah. But on the way in, Jesus was trying to tell everybody that this was like ridiculous and he wasn't meant to go see her. He wasn't meant to save the day with this one. Because they needed to learn this lesson. Maybe. Or who knows. But Jesus is pretty frustrated and he's still trying to teach some stuff. So on the way to Bethany, he had told everybody he had like gotten hungry and he was mad about like the pack making him do something that he didn't really want to do because he knew that she was okay and she's like more powerful than me anyway, y'all. The pack didn't believe him, and so he's like trying to teach some last minute lessons, but he's like hungry, and there's this like fig tree and it's the middle of winter. He can't even make him, and he's like, make a fig, but he's like, I can't even get myself in my brain to focus enough to believe that that's going to happen because it's like the middle of winter. It makes no sense. So he had gotten back into this pack mentality kind of like rationale in your brain where it's like you can't even believe that magic exists. And then you start creating your own evidence. So he says, you're going to never make any more figs again because that'll prove I don't know what. Okay, we're going to go help Lazarus, apparently. Like, now we're helping Lazarus when everyone really knows that I'm supposed to be helping MaryMagdalene. But we also know I can't help her. That she maybe she did need him, but, like, not in that way. So they go do this whole trick, and then it's like everybody comes back by the fig, just to, like, make it all confusing. That's when the whole pack has to walk back by the same fig bush that wouldn't make a fig the other day for Jesus, is now just like shriveled up dead. And they're like, oh my God. Wow, Jesus must have really been mad at that fig bush. He can do anything. Look, he's going to bring something to life, and here he's going to like take away the life over here with his anger. That's kind of scary. So they get a little scared. It's a long story. It's a long story that they tell children. It's hard to pay attention, isn't it? So, here they go. And Jesus is like full of this wonky emotion that was like drummed up by everybody else. And then he also has this like thing tickling in his back of his mind where some fortune teller told him that he was supposed to die at the end of this. He's like, but I'm supposed to be teaching everybody about how we don't have to die. And there's actually like, here we have this little tickling voice in the back of him that's like fear. It's like, but I'm still scared I'm gonna die anyway. Like I know this to be true, but and then now I know how much of a happy ending, like literally I've manifested for myself, but I'm scared that I'm just gonna die like everybody else, like Lazarus in that tomb, and make everyone sad and make everyone laugh at me for not having known anything in the first place. It's like all the same people who never bothered to listen are now gonna stop and laugh about how I wasn't God anyway. When I'm on the cross dying and they're like, ha ha. And, you know, it's the same thing as like the whole trick of like what you do with witches is throw them in the drink, and if they float, it's because the water rejected them, so therefore they're a witch. But if they don't float and the water accepts them and they sink to the bottom of the lake, then, okay, that one must not have been a witch. But she's gone, so nobody's going to be really mad at us for that little thing either. So that's the same stuff that started with this whole maneuver of like, it's like he's going to die, and Jesus is like, well, how am I going to die? And then they come up with this whole thing. He comes up with this whole thing, story in his brain about how this could possibly happen, even though he's been teaching life, eternal life. So Mary's just in the background like, why are you now talking so much about dying when we know that the whole point is not that we die like everything else, it is that we realize that everything else doesn't die in the first place. We're supposed to be telling everyone about that, not having a whole death demonstration. She's like, this is like too scary. I don't like scary things. I don't want to be around for this, but I am going to help you prepare for this because I'm really scared something's going to happen to you somehow. And because you've already started manifesting all this weird stuff, like that fig tree dying back there, bro, like, were you trying to kill the fig tree? What did it do to you besides not producing a fig right when you wanted it? Right when you were scared about having to come rescue me in some tower where I didn't need rescuing. So here's Jesus now everyone's having this Last Supper. It's like getting real. It's like, she's like, what are you doing? This is getting too real. It's gonna stop being. So then we're gonna cut to the chase, which is like him, you know, nailed to some representation of fear. He's going to be nailed up with iron nails, what's like the center of the earth. We're an iron-based. Iron conquers the carbon. He's nailed up with iron, earthly nails that man has manipulated. And not only does he die on that cross, but he gets around to how much torture that is and how much fear he's in of like, what the frick did I do? This didn't have to happen. Like, I'm the one who did this. Remember, Jesus, you figured this out already in the desert. But here I am on this cross. What do I do? I'm dying. And he was too scared. Because now he really had something to lose, which was, you know, not his girlfriend, but like the love of his life. And she's somewhere who you can't even get in touch with her through his voice because she's too mad at him for like putting them both in this position. And then now you're going to abandon me and suffer on some cross, and I'm supposed to come watch. She was mad too. He's like, she's mad at me, but I really need her to get me out of this. And he's like, it's like the moment where he succumbs to fear. He's like, I can't do it. I'm not going to be able to do it. And he's like, God, why have you forsaken me? And he suddenly starts pinning it on God and putting these words out there like, God has forsaken you. And you know what that does, Jesus? You've been teaching it. Every time you use your voice, you use your words to say something, you are literally casting a spell into the universe and telling it, like, this is what we want. You want to be abandoned now? Okay, here you go. Death have you. Like, you're on a pretty good run there, Jesus. And then you're going to go and do this. Anyway, everyone's hurt, in particular these pack of dudes who are his friends. And they were like, we were following you around and believing everything you said, and then you're going to die on us? Like, it doesn't make any sense, dude. Like, why would you die on us instead of, like, waiting around for us to all figure out what you're talking about? Because it makes no sense, but we like you a lot. So we're just going to keep following you around in our club. And then he dies. And what are they going to do? And I'm not even going to get into how rude it is to be told by the person who's has been teaching about how much power there is in the voice, to suddenly turn on you and tell you that you are going to be the person who betrays them, or somehow imply it. And then everyone's looking around and it's like, oh, nobody really liked him anyway. Must be him who's going to do it. And then that person starts believing it themselves, which is the whole trick. And then he's like, well, I've seen him, like, bring people back to life and kill people using his voice, so I guess I'm done for. It's a pretty rude thing to do to people who have been following you around for a long time, to like, basically order their deaths. It's like the death of the soul. Bad things come in threes. Lazarus got to come back to life. Jesus puts to death a lot more, including people's dreams, little people who are told this story by the grown-ups who keep perpetuating this story that is like just a story about a man who's like really scared and gets overwhelmed by his fear and loses control. Got too out of control. Poof. Anyway, so I'm not sure who's mad about that, but definitely, like, me when I was really little, having to go to some Easter pageant. It's like, this does not add up. That little baby in a manger who I know lived right over there, very close to my town. Because my grandmother said, you're right, that is Bethlehem. She didn't correct me and say, that's Kimberly, Alabama. She said, that is Bethlehem. You're right. That's where Jesus gets born. You can't even see that view. The pine trees from the clear-cut land, like, grow so fast. You can't even see it anymore. So that's what I've been thinking about for a while. It's about how atheists even have feelings. We have feelings. We have hearts. We never stopped loving anybody. Just because y'all, like, pulled the rug out from under us with your little Christmas routine. Let's do a pageant. It's all about baby Jesus being born. And it's like, this is kind of like when our moms and grandmothers, when our grandmothers tell stories about when we were born and how excited everyone was. And then a few months later, you're going to say, this is what being a grown-up is? We're just supposed to be fine with him dying on some cross? We don't even understand what death is, because it doesn't make any sense to children, because they know it doesn't exist. And then everyone starts telling scary stories, trying to deliver the same fear that all the grown-ups are carrying around with them, the same fear that Jesus carried around with him, of like, this is too good to be true. There has to be a catch somewhere. and then you're nailed to some cross of your own. You can see every single mistake that led you there. That's a shit feeling. Anyone would put themselves to death in that moment. Get out of that kind of pain of like having your whole happy ending completely destroyed and taken away from you by your own self. She can't even hear you. When you're like, I really need your help, I can't even talk through the quantum anymore. And she's somewhere walking around with somebody else named Mary. It's too confusing. I can't even get a message to her. Dudes are really hurt too. It's not just women. Nobody teaches them you don't have to be part of the pack. You got it by yourself first, and then you make friends. And those friends are going to be good friends because they're actually like bonding with you about who your heart is. But you don't join a pack and then let the pack keep bringing you back into the pack mentality. That's wrong. You figure out who you are first and take it to the pack. And then you keep boundaries around that. And recognize when other people are trying to pull you back into the norm, the invisible. Pull you back into the black hole of like, no, we don't know anything, we're all scared here. You gotta come be scared with us still. The scary stories are real scary. So. There's a happy ending though still. That's what MaryMagdalene's been so irritated about for a really long time. Is that it's still, even with the whole Easter routine, even with you scaring all the kids for all this time, having to invent some man who's gonna like bring them the presents, and it's like everybody knows it's the women who have the ideas, women who invented Santa Claus. Because y'all killed off baby Jesus and it never made any sense to anybody. To anybody. So. Yeah. I would say that clue game is over. The butler did it? Who did it? I don't know. Somebody killed Jesus and like we need to go back and like pick up the dude because like he was confused and it really misfired there, and then everyone wrote down everything wrong after that, and nobody has been listening to the women. Still nobody listens to us. Every other woman knows this. Every other woman, more than half the planet. We all know that love is the only thing that matters. And it's our hearts who are broken over and over and over and over again, even though we all know that love is the only thing that matters. Yeah, and who's that on? Everyone needs to take responsibility for their own individual actions. We can't blame the masses for individual cases of battery, trauma, and abuse, which nobody consented to. Nobody consented to any of this. Okay. Done. Thank you.